Hey there. We're diving deep into the world of microeconomics today. I know it can seem a little intimidating at first, but trust me, getting a handle on these fundamentals can really change how you see the world, especially when it comes to business. You've been going through your microeconomics notes, it seems, especially Strand Two. And that's perfect because today we're going way beyond just defining terms. We're going to unearth those aha moments, those clicks that make this subject really come alive.
You see, at its core, microeconomics is about choices. Every single day, we're all making decisions, often without even realizing the broader economic forces that are in play. Microeconomics gives us the tools we need to understand these choices and the ripple effects they create.
It's like the saying, no man is an island. Our individual choices matter. From the type of coffee we buy to even bigger decisions like starting a business, all of these feed into this larger economic ecosystem. And speaking of choices, let's talk about the dynamic duo of economic supply and demand. You've probably seen those classic graphs in your notes, the ones showing how prices shoot up when demand is high and supply is low. It makes sense on paper, sure,
Yeah.
but let's bring it to life, shall we? And we use this scenario straight from your notes, the All-Ireland football final tickets.
Picture this.
Oh,
It's the week leading up to the final, and anticipation is at fever pitch. Everyone and their mother wants a ticket. There's a very limited number of seats in the stadium, but the desire to be there to experience that electric atmosphere firsthand, off the charts. So naturally what happens? Ticket prices go through the roof.
It's exactly like trying to snag those concert tickets to see your all-time favorite band. It boils down to scarcity, doesn't it? The fewer tickets available, and the more people desperate to get their hands on them, the higher those prices climb. Now here's where things get even more interesting. You have a note about giffen goods, which is kind of a curious concept in economics, but it really underscores how even basic necessities can be swayed by supply and demand, sometimes in really unexpected ways.
Absolutely. Now, a giffen good, it's a product where demand actually increases as the price goes up. This usually happens when you're dealing with essential goods, think basic food staples for lower income households. They might be stretching their budget as it is, and when the price of this essential good increases, they may have no choice but to cut back on other more expensive things in their budget. And ironically, this can lead them to buy even more of the cheaper good, even though the price is going up.
It's a bit counterintuitive at first glance, isn't it?
Yeah.
You would typically expect demand to drop as prices rise, but with giffen goods, it's like this economic loophole appears. And this brings us to the heart of it all, the price mechanism. It's not just some arbitrary number slapped onto a product.
It's more like this massive communication network, constantly sending signals between buyers and sellers. The price of something, it tells producers how much people want it and how much they're willing to shell out for it. At the same time, it tells consumers how much they need to budget, how much they need to have in their pocket to actually buy it. It's this constant balancing act.
And this balancing act, it has real-world consequences, especially when we see those sudden shocks in supply or demand.
yeah.
Think about something like a natural disaster. It can completely disrupt supply chains, making certain goods scarce almost overnight. And as we've seen, scarcity often leads to.
Higher prices, exactly. Let's say a major storm rips through a coffee-producing region. Suddenly, that cup of coffee you need every morning just got more expensive. That's the price mechanism in action, sending a signal to consumers that coffee is in shorter supply, encouraging them to perhaps cut back or even find alternatives.
So we've seen how the price mechanism works, right? It's constantly adjusting to reflect that dance between supply and demand. But what happens when things aren't so clear-cut? What if even a tiny price change leads to a huge swing in demand? That's where we get to the fascinating concept of elasticity.
Elasticity, it's all about measuring how sensitive the demand for a product is to changes in its price. Think of it like this. Some products, they're like those rubber bands. You stretch the price a little, meaning you increase it and demand snaps back big time. Then you've got others that are more like a sturdy rope. Even a big price hike barely makes a dent in demand.
You know, I love that analogy in your notes, comparing it to stretching a rubber band versus a piece of string. It really paints a clear picture. So when we talk about elastic demand, we're talking about those products where a small nudge in price can cause a big ripple in how much people want to buy.
Exactly. And your notes even include a handy-dandy tool to measure this elasticity, the price elasticity of demand, or PED for short. Now, before you run for the hills at the thought of formulas, just remember, this isn't about memorizing equations. It's about understanding the relationship they reveal.
It's about knowing if a product's going to be a hot seller, even if the price goes up, or if people are going to jump ship and find something else as soon as they see that price increase. And that, my friend, that's golden information for businesses.
You hit the nail on the head. Let's say you're a retailer and you're trying to figure out if you should put something on sale. You've got a limited budget for discounts, so you want to make sure you're picking the right products to promote right. This is where understanding elasticity is like having a crystal ball.
So if you know a product has that elastic demand, you might be more inclined to slap a sales sticker on it, hoping a lower price will attract a whole bunch of new buyers. I think you had an example in your notes, right? Something about a retailer with a product that had a PED of 1.67.
That's the one. They found that for every 1% decrease in price, they saw a whopping 1.67% increase in sales. Talk about a major impact. This means that when it comes to this specific product, people are really paying attention to those price changes.
So even if they have to take a little hit on the profit margin for each item, that increase in sales volume could more than make up for it. They're playing the numbers game and using elasticity to their advantage.
Now, on the flip side, let's say you've got a product with inelastic demands, something like essential medication. People are going to buy it no matter what, even with slight price changes. Discounting it might not move the needle much in terms of sales, and you could end up losing out on potential profit.
So elasticity isn't just some abstract idea in a textbook. It's a real world tool that can help us understand why people buy what they buy and make smart business decisions. But at the end of the day, businesses aren't just driven by profits, are they? Your notes touch on something that I think often gets overlooked in all the talk about economics. The idea that businesses can have goals beyond just maximizing that bottom line. And honestly, I think that's a much more interesting conversation to have. It's so easy to think of companies just as these profit-making machines, right? Like they've got dollar signs in their eyes, but it's got to be more complicated than that. Your notes mentioned something called sales maximization as a possible objective for businesses. So is it really all about just being the biggest player, not necessarily the most profitable one?
It's a really interesting dynamic. Sometimes a company might focus on growing really quickly and grabbing a big chunk of the market share, even if it means they make less profit at the beginning. It's like they're playing a long game, aiming to be the top dog in their industry in the long run.
It's like they say you got to spend money to make money, right?
Yeah,
And they're willing to invest a lot up front, maybe even lose money for a little while, if it means they can eventually be the big fish in the pond.
exactly. Think about companies like Spotify or Netflix back in the day when they were just starting out. They were all about getting as many subscribers as possible, even if it meant giving out big discounts or spending tons of money on content. They understood that having a huge base of loyal customers, that was the key to winning in the long term.
And it's not always just about dominating the market either, is it? Some companies are really focused on things like ethical sourcing, sustainability, or giving back to their communities. They're willing to accept a little less profit if it means they can run their business in a way that aligns with their values.
You got it. And more consumers are picking up on this too. They're becoming way more aware of how what they buy impacts the world around them. These days, things like fair labor practices or eco-friendly production can really make a difference in a consumer's decision to buy something.
It's like you're voting with your wallet each time you buy something. You're choosing to support the businesses that share your values.
Exactly. It all comes back to those choices we were talking about at the beginning. Every single purchase is a decision, and those decisions, they have a ripple effect.
And speaking of decisions, what about the role of the government in all of this? They're not just sitting back and letting the free market run wild, are they?
Not exactly. Governments have a huge impact on how the economy works. Your notes talk about different ways governments get involved, comparing it to a sports game.
Oh, yeah. From a hands-off approach, kind of like a casual observer, to a strict referee style where they set firm rules and regulations.
And just like in sports, finding that sweet spot, that balance is really important. Governments have a whole bunch of tools. They can use taxes, subsidies, regulations. They can even step in and provide certain goods and services themselves, things like healthcare or education.
And I bet each tool comes with its own pros and cons, its own potential consequences. You mentioned the example of Apple and the Irish government in your notes.
Yeah, that's a classic case study that shows just how tricky government intervention can be. The goal is to attract foreign investment and create jobs, which sounds good in theory, but it also led to a whole debate about corporate taxes and whether or not it was really fair competition.
It really highlights how economics is so much more than just numbers and graphs, isn't it?
Yeah.
There are ethical questions, political realities, and real social impacts to think about.
Couldn't agree more. And as you continue to learn about economics, just remember that there's rarely one right answer or a solution that fits every situation. It's all about understanding the trade-offs, hearing different points of view, and having those important conversations about how we create a more prosperous and equitable society for everyone.
Well said. I think that wraps up our deep dive into the world of microeconomics for today. We started with the building blocks of supply and demand and explored how elasticity affects pricing, the different things that motivate businesses, and even the role governments play in shaping the economy. Armed with this knowledge, you're now equipped to see the world through an economist's eyes. You can start to uncover the hidden forces that drive everyday decisions and global trends. But remember, economics isn't some dusty old subject stuck in a textbook. It's a living, breathing thing that's constantly changing as we make choices and interact with the world around us. So stay curious, never stop asking questions, and who knows what economic mysteries you'll unlock next.